So in the studio with us today, and hopefully on the phone relatively soon, we'll have a second caller, but we're really fortunate that attorney Gerald Griggs has made time for us today, and we thank him so much for coming into the studio. I see Gerald, I have to admit, mostly at demonstrations, and now here we are sitting next to each other, involved in many cases, but he's here in the studio today to talk about a specific one. So I'm going to ask him to say a few more words maybe about his own credentials, and then we'll get right into the case of Jimmy Atchison. Hey Gerald, thanks.
Well, thank you for having me, Diane, and it's always an honor to be here at WRFG. I'm attorney Gerald Griggs. I am the third vice president of the state conference of the Georgia NAACP and the first vice president of the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP. And in that capacity, I have come into contact with numerous police-involved shooting cases over the last 5 years, specifically in the Atlanta area as well as North Georgia. And one of the most disturbing ones is the new case of Jimmy Atchison, who was murdered January the 22nd, 2019, right here in Southwest Atlanta at Allen Temple Apartments. He was in his apartment when police knocked on the door, alleging they had a warrant for his arrest. He fled from police and ultimately went to the Candy Lady's house and hid in the closet unarmed. And as he was giving up and surrendering to police, he was shot in his face one time by Officer Sung Kim, who is an Atlanta police officer and a member of the FBI task force. The day after that, we got the phone call from his family and his attorney, his other attorney, Tanya Miller, in regard to this case, and started our advocacy for Mr. Atchison, which is going on with multiple rallies, multiple town halls, multiple demonstrations, and ultimately we are still asking for justice for this family, both from the Atlanta Police Department, but also from City Council and the mayor, because there has been extensive silence on this case, and we want to bring this case to light. We want to inform the public, but more importantly, we want to bring justice to the Atchison family.
All right, so if you could explain to our listeners what it is about this FBI task force, because this is the second case that has gotten a great deal of publicity in Atlanta, the first being that of Jamarian Robinson, who also was killed during one of these so-called attempts to arrest somebody on a warrant.
Yes.
So where did this task force come from? Who's in it? And why is it that local officials can't get any information from the FBI?
Well, the task force is primarily tasked with serving arrest warrants for people charged with felony offenses, serious felony offenses. And so they call in a cadre of individuals from different jurisdictions to form this task force, mainly local law enforcement, some sheriff's departments, sometimes a U.S. Marshal. But the purpose of the task force is to serve a felony warrant for aggravated assault, armed robbery, or murder. But again, anybody with a warrant is just accused. They have not been convicted of these offenses. Because it's headed by the FBI, it's not under the local control of the local jurisdiction, and thus we don't have as much transparency. So that's why the family has gone to the U.S. Attorney's Office to question the policies of the task force, and we are calling the local law enforcement to question about their membership in the task force.
So I just want to ask, usually the task force gets involved when it's a violent crime?
Typically a violent accusation.
Accusation.
At this point, when a warrant is issued, no one has been formally convicted of anything, so it's an accusation.
But my understanding is Jimmy's case, it was about a so-called stolen cell phone.
About a stolen cell phone a few weeks prior to that, and we actually have witnesses that indicate that he was not even a part of the theft of the cell phone. So we believe that Jimmy was completely innocent, that he was afraid for his life, so much so that he fled and was hiding in the closet unarmed when he was contacted by law enforcement, at which point he tried to give up and was shot in his face. We now know that there were not one, but 4 individuals in the room when Jimmy was surrendering, and only one person fired one single shot directly in his face.
All right, so going back to the Jamarian Robinson case, there's been some attempt by D.A. Howard
Yes.
to try to even interview the FBI agents and others who were on the site of that shooting. and he has been denied access to them, as I understand it from newspaper accounts.
That's correct.
Is that the same with this case now?
Well, at this point, the family's had an opportunity to meet with B.J. Pak, who is a U.S. attorney, about the FBI's involvement. He's ordered the FBI to turn the case back over to the GBI. So now the GBI has begun its investigation. They got the case about 2 weeks ago. So from January the 22nd to about 2 weeks ago, the FBI had it, and they did a very limited investigation. So we're having to start from scratch with the GBI investigation, and that's why we're calling on members of the GBI to be forthcoming with the information and make up for the time that's been lost in the stalling by the FBI. Again, Sun Kim was never a member of the FBI. He was an Atlanta police officer. He did not have his body cam on, which has now caused an even greater problem, and that's why we had a meeting with the mayor and the police chief to push for the implementation of body cameras on all members of Atlanta police, whether they're on task force or not, and we were successful with that. But we want transparency. We want to know what happened to Mr. Atchison while he was in the closet, what caused him to fire that single fatal shot, and why the officer Kim is still on duty. He's in desk duty, but he's still employed by Atlanta police, and we want him terminated and appropriately charged for malice murder of Jimmy Atchison.
So let me ask this question, because you're a lawyer, and yet, but often prompts some movement on things like this are actions by community folk. In other words, not pursuing a kind of a loss, what am I saying?
I'm an activist as well as an attorney. So what
So
you're trying to say
yes,
is,
I'm trying to say about how do you balance those two things?
most of the time, I don't participate directly in the lawsuit aspect. I am on several cases currently, but most of the time I organize with my fellow activists. And what drives me is the fact that these families are not getting justice. I know of at least 9 families that currently have active cases in the metro Atlanta area, 5 of which are against Atlanta police. And so how I balance it is, I look to guys like Thurgood Marshall and Johnny Cochran, who took a step out of the courtroom and into the vineyard to do the work of justice. And so my hope would be that through my actions and my knowledge of the law, I can push for swift, accountable action in the political arena as well as the legal courtroom.
All right, so you said that this family has at least gotten face-to-face meetings with a number of people
Yes.
who have the potential for being able to produce more
Results.
facts
Yes.
and results. Why do you think that happened?
I think absolutely. I think each case is building on the action of the previous case. But in Atlanta, there's a climate of this doesn't happen in our city. And what we're doing is we're exposing, yes, it does, and we have to be held accountable, whether that's the mayor, whether that's the governor, whether that's the president, whoever. And so in this particular case, with the FBI doing this multiple times, it's time to hold the U.S. attorney accountable, the field head at the FBI accountable, to make sure these cases move forward and stop stonewalling. But the activism on the ground is definitely visible. There definitely sustained movement that's happening, and that's why in Jimmy's case we were able to move so quickly because we built on the action that had come before. I mean, we've been marching since 2016, and we've been holding pressure, whether that's Gregory Towns' case, Anthony Hill's case, and so many other cases that are building toward us achieving justice for all the families.
So, can I ask still another question going back to the FBI?
Yes.
Is there any kind of way that you, in any capacity, are able to find out how many other warrants like this end up in the person being dead?
Currently, no, because the FBI doesn't report on those statistics. But hopefully through sustained pressure and through activism and through raising awareness with the public, we can start affecting our policymakers who directly affect the FBI, whether that's our senators or whether that's our representatives. We've had great work with Representative Hank Johnson and Representative John Lewis, who have looked into these cases and are assisting us. But we need more of our representatives to put more pressure on the Justice Department to actually do something about these police-involved shootings that are just an issue throughout the country, but primarily in Georgia. There have been 26 police-involved shootings since the beginning of the year. Since 2016, there have been 151 police-involved killings in Georgia. That is an astronomical number, and we have to address this. So, you know, we have a new GBI director who's the former Cobb County District Attorney, who I know very well, Victor Reynolds. We've had numerous conversations with him about police accountability, but ultimately it's going to come from our lawmakers. It's time for legislation that puts teeth in the abilities of district attorneys and U.S. attorneys to charge law enforcement officers who violate the public's trust.
Gerald is going to give us those facts right now.
Yes, if you want to find out more information about Jimmy Atchison, please just go to the NAACP's website or our Facebook, or type in the hashtag Jimmy Atchison or Justice for Jimmy. It's populated with all of the articles, all of the videos, the previous protest that was last Friday, where we went to the police headquarters and had a very nice conversation with them with the First Amendment about our displeasure with what's happening. So go to the hashtag Jimmy Atchison or Justice for Jimmy. You can find out all the information on all of these cases and help the Atchison family get justice, because that's what this is about. It's about bringing justice to a family and making sure that Jimmy's life mattered, his name mattered. He was a father of two. He was an aspiring rap artist who had numerous songs that were about to come out, and he was a son of Southwest Atlanta. So the powerful need to understand that we will keep his name alive and we will get justice for Jimmy.